I wanted to bring you guys a special video today discussing the pros and cons of going SLI, especially going beyond two-way SLI, such as three-way or four-way SLI. A lot of you have been asking me how I got four-way SLI with the Titan X Pascals to work, and I'm going to discuss that in this video and also share with you guys the really awesome nature of just having a beastly system, especially with 4 cards, and also some of the downsides about having more than 2 cards in SLI or just SLI in general. To start off, let me give you guys a little background info on the Uber rig, especially given that I just released the setup tour of my rig and shared with you guys the parts of my system and just the overall nature of the PC that I'm using. I've had 4-way SLI for many years, starting in 2011 when I used to run 330-inch monitors. I used to have the Dell U3011 monitors, first in landscape mode, and then I changed them to a portrait orientation, and you can see some of the earlier videos on my channel where I had both configs with the 330-inch monitors. In fact, the name 30IR comes from their 30-inch reviews, and that's how I kind of thought of it. But back in 2011, I started off with the four GTX 580 classifieds, where each card took 3 8-pin connectors, and I was actually running 2 1200 watt PSUs, and it was just an insanely power hungry rig back at that back in the day, and the performance was fantastic, to be honest, for its time. I believe Battlefield 3 came out during that when I had that rig in that configuration, and it was still getting well over 60 FPS, and it was a lot of fun doing that. So as an enthusiast, I see a lot of value with getting really high performing parts, and I'm sure you guys can relate to that. If you love gaming or PCs in general, and you build your own PCs, you want to get the best parts that you can, that your budget will allow, and also something that you enjoy, and that enables you to do what you want. So I started off with 580 classifieds in 4-way SLI, and then the next iteration of the Uber rig, I had 4 680 classifieds in SLI, and ever since I started with 4-way SLI, I've been, obviously I've shared my content with you guys on YouTube with 30IR and through the website at 30ir.com, but I've also shared my stuff online at various forums, and people would always question me, saying, hey, why would you do 4-way SLI? It's such a waste of money, or you should just go with 2 cards maximum, or no SLI at all. And there's this repeated notion that there's a lot of micro stuttering, and it has some validity, but as someone who's been gaming with 4-way SLI for more than 5 years now, I can tell you that the pros of going with 4-way SLI far outweigh the cons of doing so. You might ask yourself, why would anybody want to go 4-way SLI when you can just get a single card and play 60 FPS or whatever at 1080p, especially in the current time. You can get a 1070 or a 1080 or even a Titan X Pascal and play at 1080p or even 1440p with 60 FPS. Why would you care about going SLI, let alone 3 or 4-way SLI? And I'm gonna basically tell you guys the main reason for going with such a monstrous rig. And from day one that I started doing 4-way SLI with the 580 classifieds, the reason behind that was because my monitor configurations have been so advanced for their time that merely running 1 card or even 2 cards barely was enough in order for me to get playable frame rates. And as PC enthusiasts, we know that 30 FPS is for console kiddies, and not for serious gamers who, you know, build their own PCs. 60 FPS is minimum. I know a lot of guys now will be like, well, you know, 120 hertz or 144 hertz is the way to go. And, you know, I agree to a certain extent. If you're like into competitive gaming, and you just want to, you know, game and not do much else, then sure, I can see the point that, you know, you want to get a really high refresh rate monitor. And that's why on my second rig I have the Asus ROG Swift, which does 144 hertz at 1440p. But that's another story. I'm talking about 4-way SLI in my Uber rig, where I've had monitor configurations from 2011. As I said, three 30-inch monitors in portrait mode were 13.2 million pixels, which is about almost 5 million more pixels than 4K. And 4K monitors weren't even a thing back in 2011, at least for the, you know, public consumption. And after that, I decided to, you know, I had that configuration, I believe, until towards the end of 2013. And I noticed that 4K monitors, Dell was going to release their 4K monitor. The first one was the Dell UP2414Q, which was an IPS panel that was 24 inches, but it packed a really high pixel density, because it was a, you know, 24-inch monitor with a resolution of 3840 by 2160. But, you know, being ThirtyIR, I decided to go full hog, and I got 3 of those monitors, and I did 4K surround starting in December of 2013. And you guys can check out multiple videos I did on my channel when I had that configuration. And at that time, you know, I had been upgrading the GPUs as well. So I believe the OG GTX Titans were out, the original ones, and I had 4 of those, the superclock versions in 4-way SLI, and they were crushing the 330-inch monitors in terms of performance. I was getting fabulous performance across the board with every setting turned up at 13.2 megapixels, which was the resolution of the 330-inch monitors. But the moment I switched to 4K surround, which was a resolution of 6480 by 3840, so it was in portrait orientation, 3 4K monitors next to each other, and that was about 24.8 megapixels or a million pixels. And even the OG Titans in 4-way SLI were struggling to give me 60 FPS in most games. And the hot game back then was Battlefield 4, and you know, I had to turn the settings down to like medium on a few of the options and high on some other ones in order to, you know, get about 55 to 60 FPS. And you guys can check out the videos on my channel when I had 4K surround. Certain games, of course, performed phenomenally well, like Max Payne 3, for instance. I had every setting turned up in 4K surround. Of course, I never used AA at that resolution, but I was still getting well over 60 FPS with the OG Titans, and that was a fantastic experience. So going back to my point, you know, if your guys' question that why would somebody go with 3 or 4-way SLI, it's usually directly related to what kind of monitor setup you have. So obviously, the higher the resolution, the more GPU horsepower you need. So if you're playing at like 1080p, even getting a single GTX 1080 is a huge waste of money, because you can easily get 60 FPS or more at 1080p with a 1070, or even like a 980 would perform quite well. But the moment you start bumping up the resolution, remember, it's not a linear increase. The higher the resolution, the more demanding, you know, the performance is, if you want to maintain similar frame rates. When I'm saying that, what I mean is around 60 FPS or more. And so when you go from like 1080p to 1440p, you know, that's a couple of million pixels more rendering work that the GPUs have to do, and therefore it creates more stress on the GPU. So in order to maintain that 60 FPS at 1440p, the same old one GPU may not cut it. So a lot of people were like, oh, I should probably SLI, and many guys did, you know, 980 SLIs or 980 Ti SLIs, and were very happy. In fact, I still have 980 Ti classified SLI in my ROG Swift rig, which the monitor does at 144 hertz at 1440p, and many of the games don't actually achieve that frame rate. So even the 980 Ti's in SLI with two cards struggle. So during 2014, when I had 4K surround for most of the year, I believe the Titan Blacks were released, which were, I guess, an upgraded version of the OG Titans, and I got four of those, also the superclocked editions, and I ran them in 4-way SLI, and they performed slightly better than the OG Titans, but you know, a lot of guys who water cooled their cards, something that I didn't do, preferred the OG Titans because they could be voltage unlocked, and you know, you could crank up the voltage with your water block on there, and some of them clocked really well. But I always air cooled my card, so I wasn't concerned about that, and the 4 Titan Black superclocked performed quite well. But then, you know, I decided towards the end of 2014 that 4K surround was just too daunting for even 4 Titan Black superclocked cards in 4-way SLI, and you know, I decided to get rid of that display setup. And in December of 2014, I switched to 5K, which is the setup that I'm actually running now. Of course, when I first started, I got the Dell UP2715K 5K monitor. I had that for about 4 or 5 months, and then I switched to the HP Z27Q, which is also a 5K IPS panel, and that's what I have right now as my main display. And during 2015, I had you know, the Titan X was released at that time, and I bought 4 of those, and I did 4-way SLI with the Titan X Maxwell edition cards, and I had that for essentially more than a year actually, which was kind of a record for me. I usually switch cards pretty often, but I had them till around March or April of this year. Actually, I'm sorry, I had the 4-way SLI Maxwells, Titan X Maxwells, in until the 1080s came out, and actually I got 4 of those when the 1080s were released. But going back to the point again of why would somebody want to, you know, run 3 or 4-way, as I said, it's basically directly proportional to the display setup that you have. And if you want to play games with all the bells and whistles turned up, you know, ultra settings, you know, ambient occlusion, tessellation, anisotropic filtering, and all those things, if you want it turned up and still want to get playable frame rates, which is 60 FPS or more, you need to obviously have a great graphics card in order to get that. So when you have a high resolution display, the more GPU power is required. So at 5K, I noticed that, you know, if you guys look at some of my older videos with the Titan X Maxwells in 4-way SLI, a lot of games actually struggle to get 60 FPS at 5K. But remember, 5K is 14.7 million pixels, which is actually higher than the resolution of 3 30-inch monitors that I used to have back in 2011, which was fantastic at the time. So even 4 Titan X Maxwell struggled to get 60 FPS in many titles with all the settings maxed out. So you know, I was wondering, I mean, this is the max I could do. There's no way to go beyond 4-way SLI. So a real change came about when the Pascal architecture was released, and I got 4 of those, but unfortunately Nvidia decided to, for whatever reason, GIMP SLI support, and they limited it to 2-way SLI. So I had 2-way SLI 1080s, the Founders Edition cards in my system for about a month and a half, or until the about 2 months actually, until the Titan X Pascals were released, and the 2 1080s in SLI performed really well even in 5K, which blew my mind. I actually did a video talking about this very thing, about how I never thought that 2 cards could perform, you know, the same or even slightly better than 4 Titan X Maxwells at 5K resolution. Now, a lot of the reason that the two 1080s performed so well in 5K was because the scaling was absolutely stupendous. I mean, across the board, I had near perfect scaling, 98, 99% on both GPUs, whereas with 4-way SLI Titan X Maxwells in 5K, many of the videos, if you look at the OSD on the top left, the scaling was not that good. I was around, 60, 70% across all 4 GPUs. Sometimes some games would be even lower than that, and certain games were higher than that, and they scaled really well. But scaling was an issue at 5K, and if the higher the resolution, the more the GPUs are utilized, so the scaling gets actually better, and that's something I'm noticing even with the current setup that I have. So although I had 4 GTX 1080s Founders Edition cards, I had 2 of them in both my systems, so I never ran 4-way SLI with that setup. I just ran SLI, but once the new Titan X Pascals were announced, I was pretty set on getting 4 of them, even though at that time I thought, hey, they're going to be 2 cards in each of my systems, and it's just, I wish I could run 4-way SLI, but I'd kind of given up on the idea. And that really brings me to the crux of this video, was that, running beyond SLI with the Pascal GPUs is, an amazing moment for me, and being able to run 4-way SLI again. As a guy who's been running 4-way SLI since early to mid 2011, it was just a supremely happy moment for me that I could get it to work that way and perform so well to top it off. It's just an amazing experience, and at 5K, and now I'm doing gameplay videos in 8K resolution, the performance is just out of this world, and the scaling is just really great. So having said that, let me jump right in, and let's talk about how 4-way SLI is possible with the Pascal GPU architecture. So a little backstory before I get into the details of running 4-way SLI with the Titan X Pascals. I have a buddy of mine on the forums that I've known for many years, actually, whom I talked to, and many people have posted the link to his thread on Guru 3D, and he goes by the name of Venturi on the forums, and he runs absolutely monstrous systems. He uses them for work, and he has essentially a workstation build, but he also runs 4-way SLI, and he's been doing so for many years like I have. But I got his help on the forums in order to get 4-way SLI working with the Pascal GPUs, and the moment I got it running, he gave me several details and guidance on how to enable it, and the day I got it running, it was just like a brilliant light bulb went off in my head, and I was able to get it to work. And the first game I played was Grand Theft Auto 5 in 8K resolution, and I immediately posted a video of that. You guys can check it out on my channel with 4-way SLI with the Titan X Pascals. I was getting around, it was kind of jumpy, but I was getting around 50 to 70 FPS with these Titan X Pascals in 8K resolution, and I was running an ENB mod with GTA 5, so it was just a phenomenal thing. And from there on out, I was able to get 4-way SLI working on many of the different titles, and I've been posting a lot of videos of that on my channel recently, so feel free to check those out. And I give full credit to Venturi for helping me achieve the 4-way SLI with the Pascal cards, and it's just a really cool thing because it's kind of unique. I mean, Nvidia, for all intents and purposes, has abandoned SLI support beyond 2-way, and I'm going to talk more about this later in the video, but there's actually some ominous news that I've heard through the grapevine, that for enthusiasts like us who just love building SLI systems. I mean, we already got, I guess, hit in the gut when they said 3 and 4-way were not going to be supported anymore. Hence needing all these tweaks and things like that to get it to work properly is just a nightmare. It's not something that you can just plug and play like the previous generation cards, where you can get 3 or 4 cards, put it in your system, attach the bridge, install drivers, enable it in your control panel, and be on your way. There's a lot of hurdles and hoops you have to jump through in order to get it to work now, but that's the whole point of this video. So I'm gonna talk about that now. So how to get 4-way SLI to work with the Pascal architecture GPUs. In my case, I'm running 4 GTX Titan X Pascals in 4-way SLI. Let's jump right in and talk about it. First of all, you're going to need 4 cards. That's kind of obvious. I mean, I hope nobody missed that point. So if you want to run 3-way SLI, get 3 GPUs. If you want to run 4-way SLI, get 4 GPUs. But I'm going to mainly talk about my system, which is 4-way SLI, but it should work with 3 or 4-way SLI for both the GTX 1080s and the Titan X Pascals. The 1070s, I believe, are also Pascal architecture, but I have never owned one of those, so I can't speak to that. You guys are, of course, free to try it out, but I also want to make a disclaimer here that I take no responsibility if you guys try to buy more than 2 cards and can't get it to work, and please don't complain to me or try to blame me. I'm just here to give you guys some information that I got it to work, and it's working great for me. It may or may not work for you, so please keep that in mind. I say this, I make no claims of any warranty or anything like that. You guys are completely on your own. I'm an individual guy, just an gaming enthusiast, and I thank my friend Venturi for helping me to get it to work, and I have a wonderful 4-way SLI system now. So I'm happy, and I'm happy to share this info with you. And let's go ahead and see what we need. So as I said, first of all, you need 4 cards if you're running 4-way SLI. You install it in your system, reinstall the drivers, do the whole spiel. Obviously, if you guys don't really know how to do that, you should definitely look it up online. I use this program called Display Driver Uninstaller, or DDU for short, to remove the previous driver install. Whenever you install a new graphics card, always uninstall the previous one and do a fresh install of the new drivers. So I use DDU, get rid of the old drivers, install the new one. And for 4-way SLI, this is a key part. You have to use the version 2 of the SLI bridge. So I'm currently using the EVGA 4-way SLI bridge version 2. This is because the metal connectors on the cards allow for a higher bandwidth, in order for the SLI to work better and for smoother data flow. Is as best as I can explain it. I'm not an engineer per se, so I don't know all the nitty-gritties of it, but if you have the V2 bridge for 4-way SLI or 3-way SLI, it should work. Now, if you guys inspect the high bandwidth SLI bridge that Nvidia released, and I have a few of those lying around, both the 2-slot, 3-slot, and 4-slot card bridges, excuse me. If you inspect their connectors, they're all metallic. So you know that in order for the high bandwidth SLI to work, you need to have a metallic connector. So if you use ribbon connectors, although some people have claimed they've gotten SLI to work similarly in terms of performance to the high bandwidth bridge, that may be the case for 2-way SLI, but this will not work unless you have a bridge with metallic connecting pins. So that's a very, very important step. And another important thing to notice is the SLI cards have had 2 tabs on them for many years, actually. So they were capable of taking this V2 version of the bridge even before the V2 bridges were ever released. So we used to have, essentially what I'm saying is, we used to have shitty SLI bridges when we could have been running a high bandwidth bridge like 3 years ago. So that's kind of a travesty of the industry in particular. Like, they didn't innovate, and they came out with the V2 bridges kind of late, but hey, as they say, better late than never, right? And Nvidia now is really pushing that high bandwidth bridge thing, and it does make a difference. As I showed in another video of mine, the performance really differs when you start playing at resolutions higher than 4K. So if you're playing at 5K or 4K surround or 8K, then the high bandwidth bridge really makes a difference. But for the purpose of this video, running 3 or 4-way SLI, you need the EVGA V2 bridge is an ideal candidate for it to work. So once you have the V2 bridge, let's say for 4-way SLI, connected to the cards, make sure it's securely fastened. You go into the Nvidia control panel and just enable 4-way SLI. If you're running 3-way SLI, just enable that, and you do that by going to the SLI configuration section, and you click on maximize 3D performance, which is the top option, and the screen will go black, and it should come back and it'll say, you know, 3 or 4-way SLI enabled. But for this video, let's keep talking about 4-way SLI. So it'll say 4-way SLI enabled, and you know, everything should be fine. Sometimes you might get this notice that says higher bandwidth bridge is available in order to, you know, utilize SLI to its full potential, or something like that. I've had mixed results with this, so I'm going to talk about that later actually. But initially I was told by Venturi that this particular message is the cause that it doesn't work, and he's actually right. There's a way to get around it, and I'll discuss that later. But if you get that message, I would definitely attempt fastening the SLI bridge again, and making sure that the cards essentially, or the computer, has to recognize that you're connecting a HB bridge to the system in order to get rid of that message. They wrote into the drivers that if you don't have a HB bridge, it's going to obviously suggest that to you. So the idea is to essentially trick the system into thinking that you have a HB bridge when there are no 3-way or 4-way HB bridges available. So this is a very important point. You want to connect the EVGA V2 3-way or 4-way SLI bridge in order to get the computer to recognize that you've connected a version of the HB bridge when that's actually not the case. But you can actually do that, and that's what I've done, and that's why I'm able to get great scaling with 4-way SLI with the 4 Titan X Pascals. So the next step after you've enabled 4-way SLI in the control panel, the most important thing is to get Nvidia Inspector. This is a third-party program that's written by some genius developer guy, and it's downloadable for free. Just look it up online. And you need the inspector because it enables you to set different settings for various SLI profiles, and you can use that in order to tweak the settings to various games. And I've actually used Inspector for many years, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have as well, in order to, whether you want to choose like anisotropic filtering through the driver instead of doing it through the app, or forcing VSync through the driver instead of through the app, and so on and so forth. The inspector gives you a lot of freedom to choose different options for that particular game. So once you have Inspector installed, and you want to choose your profile and essentially maximize 3D performance, or I think it's called prefer maximum performance, you want to set that to on. I usually don't have VSync on, so you want to definitely set that to off. And you can set the settings in the inspector for that particular game, and essentially play with 4-way SLI, and it works phenomenally well, as I've shown you guys in GTA 5, in Max Payne 3, in many games like Star Wars Battlefront, and so on and so forth. So like Metro Last Light works fantastic with 3 cards, and there are many other games that work well. The important thing to realize is, because Nvidia has abandoned support for SLI beyond 2-way, many developers are also, I don't want to call them lazy, but they're not programming their games to support 3 or 4-way SLI. So many titles out there will actually not work that well, no matter what kind of tweaks you do or what kind of settings you have, and that's just a reality. So for instance, a lot of you guys have been asking me, hey, can you do some Witcher 3 gameplay? And I've tried a lot of different things, and The Witcher 3 just refuses to work properly. When I have 4-way SLI installed, I get GPU usage of about 30 to 40%, and I get the performance is worse than when I use two cards, and I get near perfect scaling with around 55 to 60 FPS at 5K. But with 4-way SLI, the usage just plummets, and the performance is around like 45 to 50 FPS, which is pathetic. So games like that, so you can't expect it to work across the board. So please keep that in mind. But there are many games that do work well in 4-way SLI and perform phenomenally well that no 2-way setup can ever keep up with. No 4-way setup from the previous generation can keep up with. As I've demonstrated, for instance, in Crysis 3, in the jungle level, in 5K, I get about 120 FPS with everything maxed out, including the Hunter Edition with the Maldo HD mod, which is just phenomenal. 4-way Titan X Maxwells were great cards when I had them, but they can never keep up with 4 Titan X Pascals, especially when they scale so well. So please check out those videos on my channel where the scaling is just phenomenally superb. It's around 95 to 99%, sometimes 98 to 99% consistently across 4 GPUs. That is the ideal scenario for running SLI, and this was one of the big complaints that people used to have, right? I mean, they used to say, what's the point of running SLI when the cards don't scale well? I mean, anything beyond 2-way is stupid. I can't tell you how many times I've heard people say that. It's extremely rude, especially when they essentially imply that you're being silly in buying more than 2 cards when they don't perform as well. That is simply not the case. I've had 4-way SLI, as I said, from 2011, and many games worked so well that I've enjoyed every single configuration that I've had. There was never a time when I bought 4-way SLI and I thought, man, these cards perform like shit, I'm just gonna get rid of them. I never did that. I enjoyed every setup that I've had since the 580 classifieds in 4-way SLI, and I'm enjoying the current setup, which is 4-way SLI in Titan X Pascals. There's just no good reason to say that the scaling is not well, especially when you can enable 3 or 4-way SLI with the Pascal GPUs. The performance is just mind-bogglingly good. That I get 60 to 70 FPS in certain games. In 8K, I mean, you guys saw my Max Payne 3 8K videos where I was getting like 180 FPS. I mean, the FPS is so high, like, it's just, I don't even know what to say. It's just like, I'm dropping the mic there, because seriously, like 8K, I'm getting 120, 130, 140 FPS in Project Cars, or actually higher than that, and I get 180 FPS in Max Payne 3. I get like 70 FPS in GTA 5 on certain configurations with demanding ENBs, and with Battlefield 4 I get like 130 FPS with everything on Ultra in 8K. There's no GPU configuration out there that can do this, and with 4-way SLI Titan X Pascals, it just kicks the shit out of every GPU config out there, and when it scales so well, it's just such an immensely good feeling to be playing at the basically the pinnacle of computing technology as far as enthusiasts are concerned. Of course, we're not going to compare ourselves with like companies that run scientific or do scientific research, or if they're into like modeling large amounts of data sets and stuff. That's different ball game. I'm talking about personal computers that any Joe off the street can buy and build on his own. 4-way SLI Titan X Pascals owns all. I want to also touch on another point with the Nvidia inspector. One of the main lines that you guys would be interested in is the line called compatibility bits. If you guys look into it some more, do some Googling on that, you'll find resources to get compatibility bits that people have found in order to get great performance from their games way back, even before Pascals were released. So with the Pascal architecture, once you've enabled 3 or 4-way SLI, if you have the right compatibility bits, it should enable you to run the cards well in their configurations, and you'll get an amazing experience. So please keep that in mind. The inspector is fundamental. It's absolutely necessary in order for you to run 3 or 4-way Pascal GPUs, and you need to have the right kind of compatibility bits in order to run those as well. Now, I know a lot of you guys are going to ask me, you know, can I give you guys the compatibility bits and, you know, the other settings or the profiles in general for the games? And I just want to say up front that I cannot. And the reason for this is simply this. The moment that information gets out there in public, unfortunately, there are people out there who are going to, you know, Nvidia could easily disable that. Let me just put it that way. So once they know that whatever works for certain games, because they don't want this kind of setup to be run, they're going to do their level best to disable this. And, you know, competing with a company like Nvidia is not really something I want to do. I just want to enjoy parts that I buy, and I feel like I should have the right to use the parts that I buy the way that I want. And I'm sure a lot of you guys feel the same way. I feel Nvidia made a huge blunder in trying to goad people into, you know, using just two-way SLI. And this is a point I'm coming back to from one of my initial comments. As I said before, I heard through the grapevine that, you know, this 3 and 4-way SLI abandonment by Nvidia has actually been a long time coming. So it's just highly unfortunate that they decided that they wanted to do this, and they actually did this when the Pascal architecture was released. Is a really, you know, terrible situation for enthusiasts like us. And not only that, I've heard rumors, and I can't confirm any of this, but it's quite possible that the reasoning behind abandonment of 3 and 4-way SLI configurations is that Nvidia essentially, you know, it's a business. They are there for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to make money. And so the way that they make money the fastest is to release new GPUs much more often than they used to. And if you guys have noticed the trend over the last, say, 2 to 3 years, you'll see that that has actually been reality. For instance, the TI versions of the cards were never a thing before. A lot of people became angry when that was released, especially now that I think about it. I believe the 780s were the first generation to have the TIs, and then they skipped the 800s and they went right to 980 and then the 980 Ti. But when the 780 Ti came out, a lot of people were really pissed off because they bought the 780 GPU like 3 or 4 months prior to the TIs being released. And usually when people buy graphics cards or parts for their system, they expect to keep it at least for a year, maybe a year and a half. Some people keep it even longer, which is great. You know, it's not something that you can, a lot of people can't just buy GPUs every 3 or 4 months. That's not an ideal situation. So what did Nvidia want to do? They wanted to basically release a particular GPU and then increase the performance of a slightly better GPU, or excuse me, they wanted to release another GPU with slightly better performance just a little while later, and they wanted people to buy that. Now, if you let's look at an example. So, if you know, let's say I'm Joe and you're Schmo, and 780s are released. I have a 1440p monitor, and I'm like, you know what? I want to play with all the settings maxed out. I'm gonna get a 780, but I want to get 2 of them because I want to SLI the cards and get 60 FPS or more. So I buy 2 780s. I'm on my merry way, and I'm gaming, kicking everybody's ass, you know, just doing my thing. And then 3 months later, the 780 Ti comes out. And people are like, hey, what the fuck is going on? Like, I just dropped, you know, $1,000 on GPUs, and this new GPU comes out that can outperform, you know, the previous card by like 30%, which is, you know, quite significant. And so you, being Schmo, decide that you want to get just one card, and, you know, you're going to be able to hit around 60 FPS in many of the games. But, you know, that may or may not be true. But my point being, when looking back to me, if I just spent $1,000 on graphics cards and I'm Joe, and, you know, 3 months later a new card comes out, I'm not going to buy that, especially because I just spent a ton of money on 2 cards that can hold its own for like the next year, year and a half until the next generation of cards come out, right? So if the next generation is like the 880, but that was never released, let's say the 980s came out, and I'm like, hey, great, I'm going to upgrade to my 980s from the 780s because now I'm cool and I bought a 4K monitor. So I, being Joe, I sell the 780s on Fleabay or wherever the hell it is. I get screwed over. Well, I make a little bit of money, whatever. I sell them, and then I get two 980s, and I believe the 980s came out. Were they 500? I don't remember exactly, but I think they were 500 a pop also. So that's another $1,000 that I drop, including taxes, blah blah blah. It's like $1,200. So I get the cards, I put them in my system. I'm really happy. Joe's happy. So I'm playing in 4K, and then 3 or 4 months later, the 980 Ti comes out, and the same story happens again. And you being schmo, you're smart, right? You want to be smart and not buy the 980s, but you want to wait for the Ti version. So you get the Ti version, and you're like, you know what? This outperforms the 980, so I'm never gonna buy the 980s again. But the issue is Nvidia essentially wants to phase out SLI over a longer period of time. This is the point I was trying to make. I hope that story made sense. I'm not sure if it did, but the point being, if you want to phase out SLI and you want people to buy, if you want people to buy your new graphics cards every few months, allowing them to build a system with 2, 3, or 4 cards, they're not gonna be back in the market to buy another card until several generations later, or at least until the next full generation of the GPUs. So they decided to abandon 3 and 4-way SLI, especially for enthusiasts who game at like really high resolutions like I do. And I thought I was screwed, because in 5K I thought two 1080s could never perform as well, and I was pleasantly surprised. But 8K monitors are around the corner, so they're going to be out maybe mid to late 2017. There's no way in hell that even two Titan X Pascals can hold 8K at any playable frame rate, unless the game's really old or something else is going on. But most of the games that I've tried in 8K perform fabulously well in with 4 GTX Titan X Pascals, but not with 2. And trust me, I've tried it with the 2-way configuration, for instance, the GTA 5 Redux mod, and I've hit around like 25 to 30 FPS on like the Ultra V2 preset, for instance. But with 4 cards, it's much higher than the frame rate's much higher than that, because it scales really well too. So their plan to phase out SLI over a long period of time, so that people will keep, they'll buy a card, and like 2 or 3 months later they'll release a new one. They're like, oh, I gotta get that one, so they sell this and buy the new one. I just feel like icky, like they should not have done that, because they're basically now going the way of like suits and ties. And that's what I mean by that is that's basically marketing and sales guys driving innovation, which is never a good idea. They're not actually doing anything. They just want to drive sales. So they just tell the tech people at Nvidia, hey, come up with a new product every so often so that we can sell more. And because they're bound into their shareholders and whatnot, they're going to do whatever it takes to hit those sales numbers and increase their share price. But we as gaming enthusiasts get kind of screwed over, because we want to run SLI or 3-way or 4-way SLI, and we're not at freedom to do that. And what really ticks me off is, if we're spending our money to buy what we want, we should have the full freedom to do what we want with that product, right? I mean, it's like you go and buy a nice car, and they kind of like limit everything based on their whatever fanciful things they have in their mind. It really pisses me off. So for an example of that is when the E46 M3 was released, they used to have a limiter on that car, and they still have limiters on their cars. I have an E60 M5 now, but it had a limiter on it, and obviously I'm not gonna do crazy speeds on the road, but if I want to go track the car, I don't want to be limited to like 155 miles an hour, and that ticks me off. I should determine how the car performs once I've bought it, right? So what is the first thing I do? I went and got that, basically delimited it and made sure that I can drive the car on the track or whatever the way I want to. So the GPUs are the same way. This is part of the reason why I felt so awesome, like when I got the 4-way SLI to work. It's just an amazing feeling that, you know, like these guys couldn't hold me back, and it was like a feeling of freedom. And, you know, thanks to my buddy on the forums who helped me do this, but getting 4-way SLI to work again was just a supremely happy moment, because I felt like I was back in 2011 when I could just buy whatever parts I wanted, put them together, and just build a system that was unique to me. And it was just fun, you know, and I could play games the way I wanted them to. And although not all games scale well, many of them do if you know what you're doing. And it's just a fun time. And you know, I feel that the money is definitely well spent. Now, what would have pissed me off was, you know, you buy, let's say you have only one computer, and you buy 4 cards, and they're like, oops, sorry, you know, only 2 of them are going to work, so you got 2 paperweights. It's like, unless you return the cards, like, you know, let's say you have them for a while and you can't return them anymore, you're screwed. You basically just pissed down $2,500 down the drain, because, you know, some company determined that it's better for you to buy a card, you know, every so often. That's just not a good trend. I really hope the people at Nvidia, if you're listening to this, you change your minds. You at least allow, you know, that this whole talk about this enthusiast key, which was complete bullshit. There's no such thing. There's no enthusiast key. It requires custom tweaking in order for it to be done. There was no help from Nvidia at all in getting this to work. So anybody who thinks otherwise, please don't be fooled. You know, this is something that, you know, is just not supported by the company. And I wish Nvidia would go back to the drawing board and say, hey, look, there are guys out there who want to run like insane systems. Let them have the freedom to do that. You know, maybe come up with an enthusiast key, and, you know, have people log in or something and be like, prove that you have 3 or 4 cards. Okay, this guy really does have it. Okay, here's a way to unlock 3 or 4-way SLI. Like, that would be a good idea. But just limiting it, you know, across the board is just not good strategy at all. And this is kind of reminiscent of Microsoft's policies, kind of, and it really irks me because, you know, being in Silicon Valley and, you know, just understanding technology in general, it's just not a good trend. So yeah, it's just, you know, that's how I feel about it. And you know, I think that it's just a good time to try it out on your own if you want to do 3 or 4-way SLI with the Pascal GPUs. But it's going to be an uphill climb. It's not straightforward. You can't just, you know, install the cards, turn it on, and be on your way. It definitely doesn't work like that. So to kind of summarize what I've said, 3 or 4-way SLI with the Pascal GPUs is definitely possible, as I've shown in many videos, and I've explained in this video here itself. It's unfortunate that Nvidia doesn't support it, but you know, 3 or 4-way SLI can be done. It doesn't work across the board in all games, but it works in many of them. I'm happy that it works in, you know, worked in Battlefield 1 open beta, so I can't wait for the full game to come out and do some awesome 5K and 8K videos in that with the 4 Titan X Pascals, and share with you guys the amazing performance. And I want you to make sure you stay tuned for that and check out all the other videos on my channel showcasing the performance of these Titan X Pascals with various games, as I said, like Max Payne 3, GTA 5, Project Cars, you know, so many other things like Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1 open beta, and so on. So in conclusion, I just want to say, you know, don't lose hope. Maybe we can start a petition, try to get Nvidia to change their minds to allow 3 or 4-way SLI. You know, maybe I'll start one, and actually I'll post a link to it in the description below. Maybe they'll change their mind for the next generation. But if you guys do get 3 or 4-way SLI with the Pascal GPUs working, do let me know. Post your comments in you know, below. And you know, as I said, I was really thankful to a friend of mine, Venturi, on the forums, who helped me get this working. And I hope you guys are able to do that. And as I said, you know, I'm sorry, but I can't share the exact you know, inspector profiles with you because if I do that, then they're going to essentially disable it, and it's not going to work for anybody. So, you know, I'll just suggest that you guys kind of do your own research, try to play around with it some with the Nvidia inspector, and if you get it to work, then, you know, great job, have fun. You know, make sure that it works properly, and you know, it's a great time. So let me know what you guys think. Hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe and share this video with all your friends, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.